You're very welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and joined by the red hot form duo, I guess, of Judah, Fortgang and Doug Kezirian. Doug, I'll start with you. I mean, it's all coming right. Best bet. You've settled into the podcast, what now, 4 weeks? You back-to-back best bets up along with Judah. That's 4-0 for best bet backers. I wish I followed you in and did a little cheeky double there as well, Doug. So you're coming into a small bit of form?
Yeah, it's kind of nice when they work out that way, right? When things unfold a certain way. But, the NFL in all sports is you got to catch the breaks. It's specifically to the NFL. A lot of times the point spread outcome comes down to like 3 to 5 plays, right? Obviously, you love these blowouts or one way or another, but the rocking chair winners. But often it's, 3rd and 6 near the red zone, and they either get a field goal or a touchdown, or you have something ridiculous like Antonio Pierce kicking a field goal. That makes no sense, but it does the cover if you're involved in that game. So it can be a head-scratching situation, and the NBA, starting last night just reminds everyone how crazy some of this stuff can get. But yeah, no, in a lot of ways, the NFL can be on the easier side, and I say that because the market is so stubborn. Like if it moves to 2.5, sometimes it'll never touch 3, and you're like, this is a one-sided game. So you don't have the volatility of line moves like maybe college football does. So in a lot of ways, sometimes the market and how tight it usually is has vulnerability. Like the Jags line last week got super high. Now I was on the dog and that was the wrong side, but sometimes you can, the resistance of the market helps you in a lot of ways. The tightness of the market helps you where it never catches, the line never really catches up to what you think the outcome will be.
Yeah, and there were a couple of dramatic late moves. You mentioned the Jags, and then obviously getting 10-0 down, you think to yourself, Jesus, what was that move for? And then the market would ultimately right there. Judah, a little bit before we get into your main talking point, I mean, the Commanders move we were just talking off air just shows you, I mean, they were, 6-7 point favorites around Wednesday, and it closed at 9. That's a 9.5, 10. That's a serious amount of money to move those markets.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we're also, in addition to just like, the markets are going to move. We're at the point in the season now where there's a little more confidence in how good certain teams are and how bad they are, right? We didn't really see many double-digit spreads, and now we've got a whole bunch on the board this week. I think that's a function of kind of having more confidence that teams like the Titans are really bad. Whereas I think if this game is played in weeks 1 and 2, there's a little bit more uncertainty and the spread's probably not as big. So I that's kind of also another takeaway I had with the Washington Carolina one.
Yeah, and then a little bit then on injuries, and like it's great saying, and we say a lot in the podcast, and particularly this season, it feels, I don't have the numbers to back this up, that there's a lot more injuries, I guess, the key players, Judah. But handicapping injuries is very important, isn't it? And how do you go about trying to do that? I mean, the quarterback's obviously huge, but you could have wide receiver 1, you can have a really involved tight end. There's a lot going on, isn't there?
Yeah, I think like we've had very few major injuries to especially like really great quarterbacks, which I think is rare at this point in the season. Certainly last year, there were a bunch of these injuries, but we've had a ton of kind of key non-quarterback injuries. I'm just looking at like even, I mean, the NFC East right now, right? You've got like Washington's dealing with an injury right now to Jaden Daniels. That's obviously massive. The Eagles have been without A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith this year. That mattered a lot in their game against Tampa. They're without Jordan Mailata. That's also mattered a lot, their offensive tackle. The Cowboys have been down, 2 of their pass rushers, including Micah Parsons, 3 of their pass rushers, including all-world pass rusher Micah Parsons. That's affected the defense a lot. The Giants lost Andrew Thomas. They allowed 7 sacks against the Eagles. You can just go down the list of teams where Seattle's dealing with cluster injuries. San Francisco is now dealing with cluster injuries at wide receiver. The Chiefs have been dealing with cluster injuries at wide receiver. And I think the kind of way I'm approaching this is to say not everything is created equal. A injury to the Giants, left tackle Andrew Thomas, matters a lot more by virtue of Daniel Jones, by virtue of kind of how the second order effects now work, that whereas you could leave Andrew Thomas on an island and be relatively confident he's going to win, it makes the rest of the O-line worse. And the San Francisco, I think, is less prone. San Francisco and KC are less prone to wide receiver injuries than the Eagles are by virtue of kind of the scheme and traits. And I have like full confidence that Kyle Shanahan's going to be able to scheme wide receivers open. San Francisco is also particularly deep. With Patrick Mahomes, his ability to create mitigates the effects. That doesn't say it doesn't matter, it's just not universal. So I think kind of really having a deep understanding of not only who's hurt, obviously, but also how that actually influences particular teams, I think leaves a lot of edge to be had, because it's a very difficult problem to price these injuries, especially because it really, if you get into the specifics of how they interact with other players and how they kind of function as part of the team, makes them non-universal by nature. So kind of looking at that specifically, because injuries to quarterbacks matter a ton. These are huge, huge injuries, right? You can see 7-8 point difference on the spread between one quarterback to another. On more of these marginal ones, I think there's a lot of room to kind of capture some edge in really understanding the who is injured and how they're going to be replaced.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, Doug. If you want to comment just in terms of injuries, and like there's just a big picture, a lot of context, and Judah outlines it well. Like the Giants, a great example. You have to look after one area and cover that means that overall O line, the example he gave there, is a lot weaker, and then you've got to factor that into your betting.
Yeah, it all starts with cluster injuries, which you'd have mentioned, and then after that, just like the nuances of it all. And that's the case with sports betting. And if you have a model and you do model player individuals and things like that, that's a really helpful tool. If you don't, you just got to kind of understand the stuff and how it's all connected and intertwined. That's why trends can be so misleading, right? This team is, whatever, 8-1 against the spread off a double-digit loss, but there were so many other factors that changed in all those games, like the opponent, home away, juncture of the season, injuries that week, and other players. It's not just a quarterback or a head coach that's involved, and all things being equal. I mean, anyone who's done a chemistry experiment knows you can't change 9 factors and cite one of them as the results change. But that's what people try to do with some of these groupings. So it really is all of this is a lesson in critical thinking. And, even if it plays out, doesn't mean it's a bad, and you lose and it's a bad bet. If sometimes, or even closing line value. I mean, I respect the market, of course, but sometimes, you can be on the right side and something can happen when the game starts. Like I was obviously supportive of any Washington bet last week, and Jaden Daniels gets hurt, and then Marcus Mariota turns into the second coming. And in all these games, like I was, against the Titans as my best bet. Then I find out Mason Rudolph's playing, and I'm like getting out of positions and things like that. Sure enough, it's a disaster from the start for the Titans. But my whole handicap was about fading Will Levis, and then Levis doesn't even start, and I just get lucky per se. Now, not that I think the Titans are world beaters with Mason Rudolph, but I just think they're less worse without Levis. So sometimes things can just happen and break your way. That's the load management in the NBA. You hope to catch breaks as much as you get that tough injury news late, but it just is what it is. But yeah, you have to kind of process everything and really be very thorough and flush it out and try to understand each of these injuries and the context surrounding it.
Yeah, a lot in that. Really enjoy that, Judah, Doug. So let's crack on. If you're new to here, all we ask, if you take 2 seconds, hit that like button, subscribe, or follow completely for free wherever you're watching or listening. We generally cover 4 to 5 marquee games. It's 4 this week. The 4 we picked out: Packers at Jaguars, Eagles at Bengals, Bills at Seahawks, Cowboys at 49ers. Found it tough this week, as we mentioned. A lot of lopsided games in the NFL this week. We're going to move on to any other bets, long shots, and then best bets as well. As I mentioned, no pressure on the guys to make it 3-2-0s in a row. So let's start. Green Bay Packers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both teams coming off here in good form. Packers 151 moneyline favorites to the Jags, who are 2.8 the handicap seeds. The Jaguars get a 4-point head start. The total in this game currently stands at 49. Judah, we'll start with you on this one. I mean, Jacksonville, we mentioned that we went 10-0 down to the Patriots. You're thinking to yourself that this team has quit on Doug Peterson, and all of a sudden they come into here with a big win and momentum. Is that still the case? Was that just a good opponent for them at Wembley on Sunday?
Yeah, I think it was. I don't. Players quitting that's certainly not my area, and I also like NFL players are motivated by many reasons. I think.
Judah, just so Drew Dinsick of this formerly of this podcast, he's big on players quitting, and he has been keeping an eye on the Jags this year.
That's that's not something I can personally get behind. These guys are motivated by so many other reasons. Either way, I think last week kind of being on New England is just a function of like the spread was 7 points in a neutral site game. Granted, there's a little bit of rest advantage by virtue of Jacksonville having been in London, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty with Drake May, and he played great. And that game can look very different if Jacksonville does not return a 100-yard punt at the end of the first half. I think speaks to, as we talk about all the time, the kind of how game scripts really matter and can kind of make the final score and results a little bit misleading. Either way, I think this is a spot where the market has not yet caught up to the fact that the Green Bay defense has been terrific the last 3 weeks. And they have started to blitz a lot more. They were about a 18% blitz team. They're a 35% blitz team the last bunch of weeks. And the results is that this team has gone from being a well below average team in most pressure metrics to now being one of the best. As a result, their yards per attempt, their EPA per play, all of the kind of traditional pass metrics have improved. And this is not like they're playing, weak offenses. They did this against CJ Stroud, against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, against the Rams. These are not bottom feeder offenses, and the results have been terrific. And then on the flip side of the ball, Jacksonville's played a ton of man coverage. Jordan Love has the third highest explosive play rate against man coverage. The Jaguars are bottom 5 in explosive play rate. Green Bay has been able to sustainably move the ball with their run game. I see this as a spot where they're particularly able to exploit the Jacksonville defense. And I think they can kind of cover this spread relatively easily, especially given the fact that I think this defense is a lot better than the market's giving them credit for.
Okay, Judah Complin shout on Green Bay. Doug, you agree that Green Bay's the play here? Going for team total, would you be as confident in that defense? I mean, it has been superb, but I guess maybe a little bit of safety net for you playing the team total rather than the spread.
Yeah, it has. I just think this offense is the most reliable, one of the more reliable things in all of sports, especially against a Jaguars defense. I guess you bring up scenarios, right? So what are the chances you get burned on focusing on the team total where they cover the spread, but not the team total? So they win like 20-10. Now there could be weather issues in Jacksonville, but something like that, right? Where they cover the 4.5 and then, or do they, score 30 and somehow there's a backdoor cover or something like that because it gets wonky and maybe the weather and things like that. I guess that's what I'm weighing. But, the Texans game was really interesting because I remember playing under first quarter and third quarter because there were some deep punts and it was a field position battle in a lot of ways. And the scoring kind of picked up in that fourth quarter when they were able to get some field goals back and forth. But I think Green Bay, there's no way I would take plus 4.5, but I think Green Bay covers. I just think the offense is much more reliable, and I do not think much of this Jaguars defense at all. I think they're in for a world of hurt, having faced Chicago and New England back-to-back weeks. Like, those offenses are okay. Obviously, Patriots are a lot better with Drake May, but I think this Packers offense and sort of name the score.
Okay, confident shout from the guys. Green Bay laying 4.5 for Judah. If you want to play the team total, go Doug's angle there over 26.5. Let's move on to Eagles at the Bengals and take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. You can back the Eagles at 2.36 on the money line. Cincinnati Bengals, who have looked better in recent weeks, 1.7. The point spread sees Eagles get a 2.5 head or 3-point head start at 1.9 now. On matchbook was 2.5 earlier. The total is 48. So the line's constantly moving between 2.5 and 3. Doug, I don't want to steal all your stats here in the first quarter, but I'm amazed that the Eagles have not scored in the first quarter all season. And if you bring that in with, say, some of their poor form at the end of last season, that is insane to me.
It's mind-boggling because going back 2 years ago, they were like the best first half team in the world because their game script was to score a lot of points, get a lead, and then the time between plays in the second half increased drastically, and they would just lead clock, protect the lead, punt, do some of that stuff. So they were an excellent first half team, and now literally 0 points in the first quarter. So here we are, a handful of games into the season. At some point, you have to bet into this, right? Whether it's first quarter unders and set, or just the other team, money line on the two-way money line. I think we might be kicking ourselves just not betting this. I don't think it's a randomness. I said at the beginning of the season, something funny is still going on in Philly. There was all this talk of friction between Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, and then it kind of went away. So I'm like, oh, was it a misunderstanding? I thought it was still there and that they were kind of sweeping it under the rug, but it had a chance of resurfacing, and I think it has, and to a certain extent. Now, Eagles had some injuries on offense when they played some teams recently. I think the Cincinnati defense is playing a lot better, especially the run defense up the middle. And that's what's led to them. Now, they've played some suspect offenses the last 2 weeks. They've faced the Browns and the Giants. And one would think the Eagles would be better. Remember, this offense for Philly was indestructible, right? They can always get a yard on 4th down. So really, it's 1st and 9 every time they touch the ball, right? That was the narrative, but that hasn't been the case, and they can't score in the first quarter. So if you're into live wagering, setting up middles like Bengals -2.5 for the game, or maybe just straight Cincy first quarter is the play. These are all things that are going through my my head. I think we're all just, Philly should have lost to Cleveland in a lot of ways. So this Philly team's hanging on by a thread, and the Cincinnati feels like it's on the rise. So for me, Bengals are past, but you got to strongly consider a first quarter play too.
Yeah, just on that, Judah, maybe you can give your thoughts on the game, but the game lines are made, then the half lines are made from the game lines pretty much all across the board. So, there is angles like Doug has mentioned there, but I'm sure there's so many other angles of that as well.
Yeah, I think kind of the question is is that a function of a small sample size? And the Eagles offense has been Saquon Barkley huge runs. Is there any reason why that should happen in the second quarter as opposed to the first? I don't know. I think kind of the more interesting point, or at least the one I'm focused on, the first quarter point is certainly intriguing, and I think does leave us to ask some important questions. But I think that the Eagles are going to be particularly sensitive to defenses with great pass rushes, especially given the state of the offensive line and Jalen Hurts' tendencies. So I'm a little bit less concerned about putting up clunkers against the Browns, who lead the NFL in quick pressure, or the Giants, who are right there behind them, where I think the offense can get going in spots where teams have a little bit of a weaker pass rush. So I can certainly see in this spot where Cincinnati ranks on the bottom of the league in most pressure metrics, the Eagles offense getting back on track. But that isn't to say that there aren't problems. There are. The results haven't been there. And ultimately that is the most important factor in predicting what's going to happen in the future is what you've done in the past. It's not everything, but certainly you don't want to kind of just assume by virtue of what they've done in the past when this is a new offensive coordinator, a new offense, new offensive line, all of these things, they're particularly relevant. I'm not on this game because I can also see the other side here, where the Eagles play a ton of too high. That's where Joe Burrow has done most of his damage. This is a Cincinnati offense that is healthy right now. Burrow is working back from his wrist injury that he was dealing with early in the season. They've got T. Higgins back. They've got their full cast of characters. We know how good this offense can be. So, if the Eagles are not going to generate a crazy pressure rate, Cincinnati can score with them. I think there are a lot of different pathways for this game to take. No bet for me, but certainly a game I'm going to be extremely interested in watching.
Yeah, and something to keep in mind with Cincy is, we know they're horrendous starters to the season, right? Zach Taylor era, they're 1-11 in weeks 1 and 2. So this year, obviously, laid the egg to New England to start, then lost at Kansas City, and actually a nail biter. They played pretty well. Then faced a good Washington team, much better than we thought on Monday Night Football. And then they've won 3 of 4, not against the greatest competition, but that Baltimore game they had. So this is a team that I don't want to say throw out the stats from week 1 and 2, but kind of throw out the stats from weeks 1 and 2, just because whether it's training camp and however they prepare for the marathon that is the NFL regular season. You kind of have to look at them from the last 4 or 5 weeks, so to speak, and they've had 2 really tough losses. How would we consider them if or even the Washington? So these 3 coin flip losses, KC on the road, Washington at home, and then Baltimore at home. What if they won just 1 of those or maybe 2 of those? How would we see Cincinnati? So for me, the only side you can play is Cincinnati, and I was surprised the line came down from 3 to 2.5.
Okay, yeah, strong lean towards the Bengals for Doug there, and Judah looking forward to watching the game. But do keep an eye on those first quarter markets. Yeah, it could be a fun one to watch. Bills at the Seahawks, both teams leading their respective divisions here. Bills 161 favorites to the Seahawks, who are 2.48. Seahawks get a 3-point head start, just above even money. The total here 46.5. Judah, yeah, both teams came off massive victories here. It's that sort of tends, I think, sometimes with really good offenses, you're leaning towards the over here.
Yeah, I like the over here. I want to talk about how one, change to a team can have major second order effects. The Amari Cooper trade, I think, is absolutely massive for Buffalo, giving them a legitimate wide receiver, which puts Khalil Shakir in a better role. kind of in the slot as the secondary guy. Now you've got Keon Coleman in one-on-ones, and he's starting to develop some serious chemistry deep with Josh Allen. You can see there's a lot of these back shoulder throws. I think it makes this offense a lot better. Seattle, I want to talk about cluster injuries, is dealing with some significant injuries in the secondary. Trey Brown and Tariq Woolen were both out last week. They do not look like they're going to be coming back. I think this is a Bills offense that can score a lot. That's no revelation here. And again, I think the Seattle defense kind of has a little bit of a trickle down from their early season success, but this is just not the same unit, especially given the injuries. On the flip side of the ball, Seattle has done a terrific job at utilizing their run game, which Buffalo is particularly vulnerable to. They're throwing a ton to their running backs, which Buffalo has been bleeding production to. And I think Buffalo does a very good job stopping offenses that are reliant on explosive plays by virtue of Buffalo's ability to limit those. But that's not how Seattle's designing their offense. They're attacking the intermediate areas of the field. They've had success that way. I don't think Buffalo puts them in a particularly disadvantageous matchup, I guess. And I think these are both really great offenses and defenses that are overpriced relative to the matchup. I like the over at 47.
Okay, Doug, yeah, Judah likes the over, likes both offenses matchups versus the defense. I'm guessing you like the Bills angle, because that's where you're leaning.
Yeah, I do. I think Judah brings up some good points about the Seattle team. I think we've learned a lot. Like the 3-0 start was a little bit of fool's gold, and that Lions game was really tight. I thought that was their best game on Monday night, even though they lost by double digits. I thought it was just a much closer game than the score would indicate. And then the Giants game at home was just a team that wasn't prepared, and then they had the short week versus the team, the Giants, that were at long layoff between Thursday night to the Sunday game. So I think there was a rest edge there. Niners sort of outplayed them, but again, that was a tight game. So I think this team's just like above average, and I think against the elite teams, they're going to have trouble kind of keeping pace with them. And the DK Metcalf injury, like I'm expecting him not to play, although he is a genetic freak, so he could very easily play. But I think that's a big setback for them if he's unable to go. Could be some wonky weather. I just see the Bills eking this out and making more plays than a team like Seattle that's good, but just I think doesn't come up with the big plays when they need to when facing elite teams that do make those plays.
Okay, so we lean towards the over for Judah and then lean towards the Bills for Doug. Our final game in our marquee section here, we're going game by game. Cowboys at the 49ers there, Sunday Night Football. Let's take a look at the betting. We currently have the Cowboys set at 286, the 49ers 149. Point spread sees the Cowboys get a 4-point head start at around even money. The total for this one currently stands at 46. Back to you on Doug. I mean, the 49ers are fascinating to me, how they're not topping the division. They're really throwing games away here. They're only a game off topping the division with Seattle. Like, they can still save their season. They shouldn't be panicking yet, but I don't know. They just seem to be. And then you add in all the injuries. There's suddenly a few question marks in the San Francisco team. It just seems a weird out of all the teams in the NFL. If you look at their games, it just seems a weird sort of the way they've gone about it. Really, I would say
it's certainly been a season you think is like reached a fork in the road and they finally win a game and then they lose a game and then they reach another fork in the road and then they win. And they've been the favorite for the NFC like all season except for now. Finally, Detroit's leapfrogged them, but they're the second favorite, which is crazy. But the upside is there, and if they get in the playoffs, nobody wants to play them. But I think there's some serious factors with how they looked last week. And like you mentioned, the injuries, right? You lose a key guy for the year in Ayuk. Samuel, we'll see. It looked like he's going to miss again. He's with pneumonia, and he's got damage, to his inner workings. So that's like a serious thing. And McCaffrey's still not back. And at some point, the injuries become too much. And Shanahan, as great as he's been, I think what's kind of concerning the most for me is that even during those struggles where they blew that lead to Arizona, blew the game to the Rams, is that at least Brock Purdy looked sharp and played well, but last week was like his worst game, right? So is that just a byproduct of facing Spagnuolo and whatever, or is this something where the truth serum's sort of out? So I'm on the under. I know that the Cowboys have some injuries that may not get Lawrence and Parsons back, right? Those guys, but it's still a defense that played pretty well, albeit against a Pittsburgh offense with Fields. But I think this number and the way this game can play out, I think we could be in for a tight game like we saw last week with the Niners. And we don't need it that low scoring, but if we get something near that. I think the under is the way to go. I don't think the Cowboys are that sharp offensively, even off a bye. I think the coaching edge is massively in favor of San Francisco. And I'll side with the Niners defense doing enough and keeping this under the total.
Okay, that's under 46.5. I mean, you can get caught up in the injuries, Judah, but I guess the team the Niners will end up having out will be quite decent. And I guess that's probably some sort of the angle you're coming with here by laying the points with the Niners.
Yeah, I think kind of what we were getting to earlier, talking about injuries, is that like injury, I think wide receiver injuries, yes, they obviously matter. Like this game was probably going to be a touchdown spread, and now it's sitting at 4. The question then is like, are those 3 points or 2.5 points, whatever it is, kind of applied appropriately given the context in San Francisco? The Ayuk injury matters a lot. Juwan Jennings is likely going to be back. I'm at least working under that assumption, which is what Kyle Shanahan has said in his pressers. He's been awesome. I mean, the guy shows up extremely well in most wide receiver metrics. He's well above average in separation at the catch point and after the catch. He's been one of the best in the league. We saw him step up kind of when he was the featured receiver, and I think it was week 3 when he had 150 yards. He can fully step into that Brandon Ayuk role. I don't know what Deebo Samuel and George Kittle's health is going to be, but it's also not as though San Francisco is like extremely weak in their depth. Meaning, like those are 3 key pieces they lost, and it's not like that's it. Whereas, like if you look at a team like the Eagles, if they lose AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, there's nobody running routes, and we saw how well that worked out for them. They still have Pearsall as a first-round pick. Obviously, he's working his way back, and also Kyle Shanahan, even well before they had this influx of talent, before Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk got there. This was a team that was generating separation at a top 10 clip every year. Kyle Shanahan can scheme guys open. I mean, Richie James popped off for a bunch of huge games when he needed to step up there. I think the injuries matter less to San Francisco, and especially in this matchup against Dallas, which has allowed the most separation of any team. This is the second year running. If you take out, obviously, these you don't just get to like fudge numbers like this, but I do think it is semi-revealing of the like actually relevant sample in non-Deshaun Watson and Bryce Young games. It's not Bryce Young. Non-Deshaun Watson or Justin Fields games. Like Dallas is allowing 10 yards per attempt. They're also by far the worst rushing defense in the NFL. The defense has been a disaster. Micah Parsons is on the wrong side of his questionable tag. This is an atrocious defense right now. The 49ers can put up points. They're going to be able to run the ball. They're still top 10 in any rush metrics, even without McCaffrey. They still have weapons on offense. I think to Doug's point, Brock Purdy's been great. I'm not worried about a 1-game sample. I'd much prefer to focus on like the body of work he's shown this year, even given tough circumstances. They haven't been healthy all year. I have much more certainty in Kyle Shanahan's ability to mitigate these injuries, especially given the state of the Dallas defense right now. And as Doug said, this offense is like really bleeding right now. They have no one outside of CeeDee Lamb to generate separation. They're like second worst in that category. They're facing a ton of single coverage. Jalen Tolbert just cannot separate it. It's leading to a ton of tight window throws. Dak Prescott has a 5% higher tight window throw than the next closest team. The base rate of interceptions there is 10 times higher on those throws than non-tight window throws. There's a lot going wrong with the Dallas offense that I don't think is just going to be solved by San Francisco. And like the advantage you have off a bye is mitigated when your players aren't healthy. That's part of the reason why buys are so valuable, is that usually you get your guys back. But Micah Parsons is probably not coming back.
Yeah, and to piggyback some of that injury talk about the wide receivers, as much as some of them are valuable, it's also like if Ayuk's out or Samuel's out, it's not like the Niners are going to play with 10 guys on offense, right? Like they get to replace injured players. So that's it's like the one-liner I always like to say, because sometimes the people do overreact to injury. So on one hand, you have to take it strong into consideration, cluster and key injuries and things like that. But then like look at the Saints last week on Thursday night, right? Not that they're a really good team otherwise, but when you just get decimated, it can be really ugly. But a coach like Shanahan, these guys almost like love to flex when there's, play calling flex, if you will, when they're so beat up, they get to be creative and really do what they like to do and nerd out on some play calling. So there's a fine line between all of this stuff. So I certainly can understand where Judah's coming from.
Yeah, and we've seen the Niners with injuries already this year, and they've covered big lines throughout the season. At times, as we mentioned, very inconsistent. But Judah Lane -6.5, a little bit of alt money there too from that 4. Currently on Matchbook and under 46.5 for Doug. Before we get into any other bets, insights.matchbook.com, full recap of all the guys' picks and all the bets put up here will invariably be best price in the UK. That's the value and the advantage of an exchange, a betting exchange. But you can, of course, use our Bet Builder product as well if you want to do some same game parlays or Bet Builders. Well, worth checking out, getting the advantage of a sportsbook, but also the pricing of an exchange as well. Any other bets? Judah, start with you here because Doug is also in agreement. Nice to get a bit of agreement on the podcast here. We've got the Ravens, Cleveland. Yeah, what's your thoughts on here? I mean, you're looking at over.
Yeah, I think right now the Ravens offense is an absolute house. I mean, they're probably the best offense in the NFL.
Just gonna ask that. Number 1, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to ignore that. I mean, the rushing attack is the two-headed monster of Jackson and Henry, and how defenses have to face that. And then just like Lamar Jackson as a passer this year is putting up his best numbers by far. And I don't think that's a coincidence, given the respect teams need to give to the run. And I mean, Zay Flowers has emerged as a wide receiver 1. Unclear if he'll be available this game, but frankly, I don't think it matters. Jackson's done a great job kind of mitigating pressure. That's basically the only thing that the Browns can do. He's been able to extend plays. He's taken way fewer sacks this year than previous seasons. And then, I mean, the Browns have not put up any offense this year, and I think there's a lot of that kind of baked into most models. But Jameis Winston, who's going to be starting, is a vastly different quarterback than Deshaun Watson and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And I do think that there are some kind of like reasons to be hesitant for the Browns offense, given the state of the offensive line, given the state of their wide receivers. But it is such a massive upgrade to go from Watson to Winston and just moving the ball. I mean, it's like hard to overstate, understate, never remember which one it is, just how bad the Browns offense was. And I think that with Winston, 44.5 in this current NFL scoring environment is extremely low. Baltimore can like probably get there by themselves. I don't think the matchup against Cleveland is one to worry about. And I think that on the flip side, the Ravens defense has been extremely vulnerable to the pass. Jameis Winston can move the ball. If anything, that's going to force kind of Baltimore to remain aggressive. I just see this as a spot where the market is giving too much credit to the Browns defense, given the state of the Ravens offense. And there's just a little bit too much residual pricing from the Browns offense without Jameis Winston. I like the 44.5 here.
Okay, and Doug, and you do as well. And feel free to lead on to maybe Falcons, Bucks, unders, given obviously the Bucks injuries, I'd say is the headline there.
Yeah, well, it starts with Hainer. I jumped the gun. It starts with Winston coming back. I mean, the last time he was a starter, albeit 5 years ago, he led the NFL in interceptions and also passing yards and was second in passing touchdowns. So he's a feast or famine guy, which you want for an over. And the Baltimore offense is, whatever Judah said. So I'm on the over there. I just think it's tough for the market to use past results with Watson and then find an appropriate over-under when there's a drastic change in quarterback going to Watson. But this Atlanta-Tampa Bay game is interesting. The last time we saw him was that Thursday night. It was a shootout, and it was on that fast track in Atlanta. Usually when division rivals have a quick turnaround and face one another, it's a little bit more of a tighter, lower-scoring game, and then you add the injuries to the Bucs wideouts. That's obviously significant. We'll see if Atlanta can handle it. There might be some shaky weather as well in this game. It's a little bit of a revenge factor for Tampa. They had the game won, but they're coming off an emotional defeat. But I lean under, or at least like the under here with the Falcons and Bucs. It's tough because this Atlanta offense is starting to figure some stuff out. But obviously they got stymied by Seattle last week. So it's not just an automatic points on the scoreboard there. And with the New Orleans game and the Chargers, I've heard grumblings of Jake Haener. Judah, I guess you said you don't think that's going to happen.
Judah said no chance. That's what he says.
Yeah, I think
I would only play the over, but you have to wait for Haener. Like Haener, when you have a bad offensive line, you got to get rid of the ball quickly, and that's what Jake Haener does. Like he's the only quarterback I would even consider playing with this type of situation with the offensive line and everything. I would not consider Rattler. I don't know why they're playing him. It's silly, but they are, and that defense is shredded. So I think the Chargers can kind of get right, even though they've gone under in every single game and they're all about slow pace and all that stuff. I think this can be a blowout if Haener plays. But, when we're taping this, I just wanted to throw it out there. If you have to get confirmation that Haener's playing for me to remotely consider the over.
Judah, and price it up. Jake Haener starting for Saints on Sunday.
Extremely low. I mean, Dennis Allen said it's a much better chance of Derek Carr starting. He said it's Spencer Rattler if Carr can go.
Oh, interesting. But yeah, Doug, we'll put that in.
Yeah, he said in his presser he liked what he did when he had protection. Coaches can tell.
I don't know how he's still coaching. Sidebar, yeah, that's ridiculous too.
We can get into that. Funny enough, I'm going to New Orleans in a couple of weeks to watch them. I think against the Falcons, and 2 weeks into the season, I was really looking forward to the game. And I don't know, there's just a bit of, I think it could be a half full stadium. We shall see. Let's move on to long shots time here. Judah, back to you. I mean, Patriots money line versus the Jets. I mean, is the angle pro Patriots here? Is it anti Aaron Rodgers in the New York Jets? Where does that sit for your thinking here before pulling the trigger on the Patriots?
Yeah, I think the Jets offense is really good and is going to continue to improve as Devontae Adams kind of gets more comfortable in that offense. I think this is a bet number one on injuries. The Jets secondary is extremely hurt right now. All three of their starting cornerbacks in week one are dealing with some sort of injury. Two of them, I think, are unlikely to play this week. They lost their starting safety last week. This is a secondary that looked nothing like this dominant Jets team. And that secondary has been kind of at the base of how good the Jets defense has been over the last 3 years now. And on the defensive line side, I mean, Hassan Reddick is I don't know if he's coming back this week. That would certainly hurt my case. Though I do think that what we've seen early from Drake May has been a terrific job at extending plays and mitigating pressure. I think that part of the reason why he's been so much more successful than Brissett, if you kind of break down the stats into the different component parts, a lot of that comes from what happens when pressure arrives. And Drake May has been it's obviously a small sample, but even in some kind of more efficiency-based metrics and less production-based metrics, he's top 10 in basically anything when it comes to extending plays and creating and generating positive outcomes once pressure arrives. And given the state of the Jets secondary, I think that's kind of what matters a lot here. And 7.5 is just a lot of points. Obviously, we're getting some extreme value on the money line here. Not that much needs to go right for May, I think, to put together a really solid performance. The Jets cannot stop the run defensively either right now. I think that was part of the problem last week for New England was their insistence on running on first down. Basically, after the first quarter, after they scored 10 points by throwing on early downs and scoring. But I think that they're going to be helped a little bit because I think they'll be able to have a little more success against the Jets and set up kind of some more positive situations. This isn't to say that I don't think the Jets are good. Obviously, the Jets are a better team. I just think that there's some serious value given how May can kind of handle this matchup against the Jets and how the market is pricing the Jets defense given the injuries they're currently dealing with.
Okay, that's 3.9 currently. We've seen the Patriots have plenty of these shots in these sort of positions as underdogs all the way back to last season as well. So maybe one to bear in mind there. Doug, the Colts at the Texans. Colts 3.25. I mean, you could look at it and they've won 4 of their last 5, scoring 34 points in their one defeat. They are capable of producing performances, and they travel to Houston here as massive underdogs.
Yeah. By the way, I thought of the Patriots as well, but I have used them before, so
we can't justify a Patriots. Both you guys going for the Patriots, whatever about one.
Okay. But yeah, no, I think it's boom or bust situation with that, and I think the same applies here. Houston's coming off a very high profile game, very emotional game, and this Colts team. You mentioned how they've won a few in a row and stuff like that. A lot of that was Joe Flacco. This is a very different team with Anthony Richardson. But I also think he's the ultimate wild card. Like, he can stink and throw for 130 yards and be terrible, or he can play really well and just, muck up the game and have this style that's really tough, and he throws a nice deep ball. And can the Texans, it's all about, the fit with Gus Bradley's defense. Like, are they the right team to take advantage of Bradley's defense and stuff like that? Because Indy doesn't get lit up every single game. Most times they do. They're not very good defensively. But I think it's a game where Houston has demonstrated they're kind of unprepared in some games, or they're sloppy, or, I've actually thought they played pretty well last week and all that. These division rivals, I think there's the variance here is like favorable to a money line play on the Colts, and it kind of Richardson's sort of an X factor in a lot of ways.
Okay, that's 3.25 if you want to play the money line, and as Doug mentioned, the tails of it. So the money line maybe as opposed to the handicap is a good way of playing it, not just before the long shot section. Best bet time. Judah, Tua's going to be back, I understand, against the Arizona Cardinals. It should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, the market certainly thinks so, given that this game is at 3. And this Dolphins offense is really good. And I think we have a pretty decent sample of who they are from the previous 2 seasons. They can create, great situations for themselves. Teron Armstead's out, but when Tua Tagovailoa is throwing in 2.3 seconds, that matters a little bit less. And they're going up against an Arizona pass defense, which is bottom 3 in literally any metric you want to create. The Dolphins can put up a ton of points. And I think perhaps most intriguing is that the Dolphins have been one of the best pass rushers in football this year. They're, I want to say, 3rd best in quick pressure rate, top 10 and 5 in most other pass rush metrics. And as we say every week, the points also reflect real points in real games. And I see this as a Dolphins spot where they should not be operating their offense any differently. And we've seen what they have done to teams with weak defensive units for 2 years. Dolphins can put up points real quick. Arizona's got some problems offensively. They're going to be having to deal with this Miami pass rush. The Cardinals have struggled to generate much offense when they can't get their run game going. Dolphins have one of the better run defenses right now. I see this as a spot where the Dolphins can cover with margin, just putting up a ton of points against this weak Cardinals defense.
Okay, let's slight alt money there, 238 if you lay 5.5. Obviously, a key number, more of a key number than maybe in previous years. Doug, Jets at the Patriots. When Judah was making his case to the Patriots, I did think over seems to be a good play the way Judah's broken down this game. So it's funny, it's your best bet.
Yeah, exactly what he was thinking. I think this Jets defense is a little bit overhyped, right? We saw even Russell Wilson go up and down, and some of that was field position aided with some kind of wonky interceptions. But nonetheless, like, this Patriots team stinks, right? You have Gerard Mayo calling them out, saying they're soft, and maybe that'll rally. I just don't think they're talented. I just think there's a lot of limitations with the Jets, and this already got steamed up from about 38.5, 39. And or at least on the look ahead line, I just think we're going to see a ton of points. Drake May, look what's happened in their games. The 2 plays he started, they've both flown over the total. And this Jets offense and all the weapons, and with Breece Hall out of the backfield, with even throwing to him, they're going to be able to name their score, and they're looking to get right. I mean, they are really looking to get right. They need a breakout game on offense just to boost the confidence and kind of catapult them for the rest of the season. And the Jets defense isn't this vaunted unit we saw last year keep games close despite Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle at quarterback. So as long as Rodgers can be, the non-MVP version of him, but still a version of Rodgers, and not turn the ball over and not have bad plays in the red zone, then get some real points, and the kicker can not hit the upright, we're going to get some points here. And I think it's just a super low total.
Yeah, super low total. I do fear Jets Patriots games, low scoring. I just see that. But over 41.5, you gotta sometimes just look at the 2 teams and take your chances there. And the guys are in good form. 2 in a row. Let's hope we make it 3 in a row, and the best bet doubles will be some decent run of form, I would say. InsideStopMatchup.com, full recap of all the guys' picks. We see a lot of you going over there Sunday morning, so well worth checking that out once again. And hit that like button, subscribe or follow wherever you're watching or listening. Myself, Doug, and Judah. We'll be back this time next week. Enjoy Sunday's NFL football. Bye-bye.